Let's get started on the scatterplots on steroids. This is what it will look like in the end. And I should highlight up front, this is nothing I would actually produce for a real paper or real research report, right? It's quite cluttered. There's so much information in it. It's quite difficult to actually understand what the main message of this graph is. So I don't recommend doing this in real life, let's say. But I'm using this example to incrementally add complexity and show you how you can manipulate different things in a graph and how you can add various variables and customize it, right? So not a real example, just showing you the different options in ggplot and sort of the depth that you can get into with it. So let's go to R and start this. I actually have something loaded from the previous session. So I'm going to go ahead and clear the whole environment. I'm going to load the tidyverse package. I'm going to load our data sets as usual. We have student data, faculty data, and course data. And I'm just going to reproduce the scatter plot we produced last week, right? Let's take a quick look at it. We have every dot is a student, and at the x-axis we have life satisfaction. In the y-axis we have age, and we see sort of a general relationship that older students are a little bit happier, it seems, right? So this is our starting point for fine-tuning this. So first of all, let's change the look of the dots by another variable. And we're going to do this by adding an aesthetic to the geom point, right? The geom point is the actual dot that is being projected onto the area. So we're going to add into this function geom point aesthetics, and then within the brackets, shape equals sex. And this means it will vary the shape of the dot by sex, so a different shape for males and females. Let's take a look. And we see now that males have this symbol and females have a normal dot, right? It's kind of hard to tell right now, but this is the first variation that we're adding here. We actually now would be able to distinguish males and females in this age and life satisfaction plot. Okay. Next, let's vary the size of each dot by how long students have been enrolled at the university. This is the variable called term. We've been using it in previous sessions. Now we're going to use it to vary the size of each of the dot. And we'll do this by adding another option here to the aesthetics function within the geom point function. It's called size equal to the variable, in this case, term. All right, let's do this, see what it looks like. Okay. We see now that the size vary, right? Some dots are huge, others are smaller. Some triangles are larger than others, right? And we see here in the legend that the sizes indicate different term breaks. However, we also see that the terms aren't really sorted correctly. This has probably to do because the term R doesn't yet know that this is a numeric variable, but it thinks it's just a character variable. This is why this is not sorted. And also the look isn't great, right? Because we actually can't see the legends very well, and the proportions are a little messed up. So let's see whether we can fix that. First, let's fix the term variable. We're going to define the term variable first as numeric and then as a factor. So R knows how to actually properly sort it and display it in the graph. Everything else for now stays the same. We're going to add another option here, theme, where we're going to add slightly format the axis text and the legend text, right? We're going to reduce the size on that. Let's run this. Right, and now we see that the term variable is looking a little better. Right, we can see all the term breaks from 0 to 14. Let's continue, and now we actually want to distinguish the dots by color, and we're going to color depending on whether students have a job or not. And again, we'll just do the same, follow the same procedure. We add an option called color equal to job, right? Everything else stays the same. So now we see that students with this olive or blue-greenish looking color hold a job, a part-time job, where those in red do not, right? And this varies now by not only sex, but by part-time job and also by the term. Okay. So as of now, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 variables already included. Now let's split the overall graph in separate groups, and let's visualize this relationship between age and life satisfaction for different faculties at the university. We can do this by adding with the plus sign and then adding facet rep function. We're gonna include whatever variable we want to use for the facets within the vars argument, and then we're going to tell our how many columns we want this split up to be displayed in. Okay, let's run that and you will see what I mean in a second here. All right, now we have the graph we had previously, but only broken up in for each faculty. Okay, so now we have 6 variables in total that we use information from for this particular graph. All right, let's add labels. We've done this before. We add a title and a subtitle, and we also change the labels for the x-axis and the y-axis. Everything stays the same, but it just looks a little nicer. Scatterplot 6 variables in one chart. We have a better x-axis title and a y-axis title. Now let's change the scales slightly. You can do this manually here with the arguments scale y continuous and scale x continuous. You can even set the limits, right? So you can manipulate the scale that is displayed quite easily here. Don't forget the plus sign. We add this argument scale y and scale x and introduce the option limits equals and then set a minimum and a maximum value here. Let's do that. Doesn't look too different, right? What I've also done is exclude missing values actually. So we have one plot less here that was for the missing values on the faculty variable, and I excluded them up here in this argument. So exclamation point is not available. So is not available. So it is available, and then faculty. Okay. Now, in the next iteration, we also add, we change the titles for the legends as well. And this should be done corresponding to whatever we changed before. For example, we have the size argument in geom point, right, which is term. So we change the label of that characteristic here in the labs function as well. So we add size and shape and color. Those are the 3 variables included in the legend, and we give them separate names here within the lab function. Okay. So if we do that and run it, we see that here the labels change: student sex, current term, student's job status. So we're almost there. Now, let's add a linear trend line. This is something that is done at times when you handle scatter plots, where you want to indicate sort of the general linear trend. You're drawing a linear line through the cloud of dots to sort of summarize or communicate a little bit more easily what the general linear trend is. You can do this in the ggplot function by adding geom smooth. Don't forget the plus sign, then geom underscore smooth, and in brackets you put methods equals LM, which means linear model, and this produces sort of a linear fit line through the cloud. Okay, let's do that. All right, now you see appearing here we have the linear trend line, and this clearly shows that there's a positive relationship between life satisfaction and age. And this actually does not vary much by faculty, right? We see the same slope here for every faculty. And we also don't, sort of with our bare eyes, we don't see a huge difference between, by term or by students' sex or by job status. Lastly, let's add several lines. We add different lines by another variable. In this case, we chose the variable job, whether people have a job or not, for the color. And we now want this line to vary for different groups. We can do this by moving the option color job, which was the one determining the color, right? We move it away from the geom point to the general ggplot function. And this means that this option, that this decision to color, to let the color vary by job, actually applies to the whole graph, not just the dots, right? So if we add additional layers like smooth here, geom smooth will pick up on that breakdown of color that is defined in the original ggplot argument, right? And it will automatically produce 2 lines for each of the colors, which we have varied by the job status. A little abstract, but you'll see what I mean in a second here. If we run this, now we have 2 lines, one in red and one in greenish, bluish, olive maybe, olive color. And we see that, the general trend is very similar. There aren't really huge differences between the 2 lines. Maybe the slope here for students in sociology is a little less steep, right? But not a huge difference. This is just to demonstrate that you can vary these lines and add more details that way. Now let's change the overall look using something I've introduced before, which is the theme. You can vary the overall theme, the overall look of the whole plot by applying a default theme. I'm doing this here by adding theme underscore minimal. There are various other choices, try them out, but theme minimal is one of them. And then what's important is if you do additional manual changes to the look, like changing the plot caption or sizes of the legend and so forth, you have to do that after you choose the default theme, right? Because it's going to take as the baseline the new theme and then do minor changes that you can do manually. So let's run that. All right, and this cleans up the graph a little bit, right? Makes it look a little nicer, a little bit more elegant, yeah, a little less cluttered. So here we are. This is our scatter plot on steroids, but we're not quite yet done. There's something else we can do. We can actually add text to the scatter plot, right? Imagine you want to label the dots in the graph or only certain dots. We're going to do that actually by adding the age, of the student to every dot. This absolutely makes no sense. We're just going to do it to show you how to do it. We're actually going to add this by adding another function which is called geomText, and then we have an aesthetics label age. So we add text which is labeling the dots by age, with the age category, right? So the age of each student should appear next to the dot. Now, I'm doing this to show you that ggplot really works in layers, right? You can add as many layers as you wish, one on top of the other. And now we're just adding additional text to the existing graph. Okay, let's run that. Well, and you see, whoa, it's a complete mess. And this basically has, for every dot, there's an age value, but the value is not formatted. It has, I think, more than 4 digits. It's absolutely ruining our graph. So we got to do some more formatting. So first, we're going to define another data set that we only use to tell which dots we want to label. Let's call these outliers. And we're going to filter the student data sets for everyone that's over 33 and under 25, and with a life satisfaction over 80 or under 25, right? And that has no missing value on the faculty variable. So we apply the normal filter function that we've learned in previous sessions and create a new data frame called outliers. And this only contains, let's take a quick look, this only contains those students that we actually want to visualize, right? Then we're going to install the ggREPL package, which is going to help us label only certain dots in that graph. And then down here, we're going to have an option called geomText_REPL, and we're going to identify the data that we'll be using to label the dots, comma, we have the aesthetics, we round each figure with the round function, right? And we want the labels to be in black and not to vary. Go back to the online course to get the exact code. I'm aware that I'm speeding through this, but you can always go back in the video or go online to fetch the code in detail. So let's run that, and we see now only very few dots are actually displayed, only the outliers. Very young students here and older students over here, right? Certain outliers in this graph. This is just to show you that when you want to provide text or label certain things within the graph and you don't want to label all of them, you first have to create a new data set and then condition the additional geomText function that you're adding based on the new data set. This is the logic behind it. All right, this is it. This is our scatter plot on steroids. Have fun producing your own steroids scatter plots. I do not recommend doing this for your jobs or your actual papers. There's an information overload in there. I just did it to show you the incremental way of working with ggplot and sort of the different options that you have. But in real life, I would go